Corporate budgets have two primary purposes: planning and control. Budgets are used to plan for sales, purchasing, production, cash flow, and profits. Long-term capital budgets allow businesses to plan for major expenses, such as automated manufacturing equipment or new factories. Budgets are also used for controlling expenditures and evaluating performance. They provide management with a set of goals which the company is expected to meet. Actual revenues and expenses can be measured against budgeted figures to evaluate management performance.
The two major reasons for budgeting are to plan what's going to happen. And in the planning process, a couple of things happen. You may decide you don't want to do some things because the plans don't look like they're very good. But then you can also refine the plan in the planning process to get it so that you really laid out what it is you want to accomplish during the period. Okay, so it helps you to coordinate what you're going to be doing. It helps you to decide what you're going to be doing, what plans are worth doing, what plans are not worth doing, and so on. And that all forces you to think ahead. Okay, and that's part of it. That's the planning process. Now, the other major benefit of budgeting is in control. And that is, it's fine to plan, but you want people to be responsible for carrying out those plans. If people are not held responsible for carrying out the plans, they'll tend to be running off in many different directions and may not accomplish what you'd want to have accomplished. So it also has a control purpose in that we compare the actual results to what was planned at the beginning of the period.
Budget's the operating plan. That's my guideline for how this plant is going to be managed and led and the kind of business it's going to develop and how it's going to make that business over the course of the year. So it really tells us step by step when we're going to do and what we're going to do in the upcoming fiscal year.
Operating budgets include a sales budget, a merchandise purchases budget or production budgets, and a selling and administrative expense budget. Financial budgets include a cash budget, the budgeted income statement, and the budgeted balance sheet.
The other piece we look at, again, is our operating budget. We start that process in about February. We're given a set of annual volume numbers from corporate for each of the products that we produce here. We break that down by size, spread it out over the year by month. We'll turn that general guideline over to then our plant operating team and say, hey, here's what you should be looking at producing next year. What kind of crewing are you going to need to support that? How much overtime does that require?
There's actually a strategic budget that is actually developed, and we have all of our companies do this on a periodic basis about once every 3 or 5 years. And really what happens there is that we will go through and look at the markets in which they compete, the technology that they employ, the resources that they have. Off of that strategic budget, that is the fundamental template that the annual business plans are actually developed from.
Okay, let's go over the budget guidelines.
Preparing and administering a corporate budget requires cooperation between all of the various departments and all levels of management. A budget committee is often created to oversee this process, but some companies may form a different structure for the budgeting process.
We don't have a budget committee per se. We have a group of people on a regional basis and on a product level basis that represents pretty much the whole planning community on a global basis, and we call it the Global Planning Council. And so we get together on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and talk about the budgeting process, the outlook process, which is kind of our quarterly forecasting process that we have in place, as well as any other concerns that might affect us from information systems, staffing, and things of that sort.
Although annual budgets were once the standard, today's rapidly changing business environment means companies may budget for quarterly, monthly, or even shorter time periods. In some cases, budgeting is a continuous process throughout the year.
And today, budgets are a very dynamic thing. They're ever changing. I can remember 10, 15 years ago, you sat down in February, and we're on a fiscal year basis, which starts July 1, goes through June 30. So in February, we're sitting here making budgets for, it could be as long as 16 months into the future. I think people have gotten a lot wiser over time, recognizing that our business is much more dynamic than it was in years past, and now we reforecast several times during the year. So basically all we're doing is updating that budget and making that plan more closely fit what our business is going to do.
Nortel Networks is a global network dedicated to building the most powerful communications network in the world. And in joining us, you are instantly connected.
We're constantly refocusing our businesses on high growth areas, so we're constantly in a state of divesting of businesses that are in kind of slower growth or no growth areas and acquiring companies that are in high growth areas. Just in '98, we did $9 to $10 billion of acquisitions and a number of smaller divestitures. So that's added a level of complexity to the planning process because you're constantly trying to change your budget to the current state of affairs.
Every company has its own method for creating budgets, but there are two basic styles of budgeting. When budget figures are generated by upper management and imposed on employees, this is known as top-down budgeting. When departmental employees participate in the budgeting process, this is known as bottom-up budgeting.
For motivational purposes, it's best if the budget really comes from the bottom up, that the people who are actually going to be doing the things, the day-to-day activities, are the ones that come up with the budgets and say, how much do we expect to spend on this, how much we expect to spend on that, how are we going to actually accomplish things. Now, from the other standpoint, though, if it comes from the bottom up, it's going to tend to be uncoordinated and may not wind up going in the direction that top management would really like the company to go in a strategic sense. So from a standpoint of coordination and strategic focus, it's best if the budgets start at the top and filter its way down. Most companies appear to resolve this in favor of let's be consistent with the strategic focus, and the budget comes from the top down.
When we put together budgets, I mean, we basically do it from a bottoms-up approach, and really what we're asking the operations and the people to do is to give us their best estimate as to really what they think they're capable of doing. Obviously, the employees are incentivized, to achieve those budgets, but we can't tell them how to do their job. So we really need to empower the employees and tell them, basically, this is your function. You know it better than we do, or better than management knows it.
It's all driven by the amount of ownership that you want your organization to have for planning. If a plant manager and a plant accountant put together a plant budget, they're the ones that own that. They're the ones that have to manage it. If you get everybody in your organization involved in the process, if you have every individual here in some way, shape, or form taking on a piece of that and then managing performance against that, instead of 2 people managing costs, you now have 200 people, all of whom are engaged in the process, all of whom have ownership for the outcome of that process.
Budgets are composed of numbers, which businesses try to live by. But numbers can never tell the whole story where human actions and affairs are concerned.
Human factors are always prevalent in any budgeting process. Everybody knows that this is a major responsibility on your performance review every year. You're going to be held accountable for delivering against that budget plan that you had laid out for yourself. So I think there's a natural tendency on most people's part to be somewhat conservative when they put that together. They don't want to be overly aggressive. We really aren't looking to really drive costs down as much as protect ourselves on that performance review.
As we've seen, budgets are part of the planning process. They express in numbers the strategic and operating goals of a company. Budgets drive decisions and are used to control and evaluate a company and its management. Budgeting often involves people from many levels and parts of a company, so coordinating budget preparation is vital.